Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Open Mainframe monthly webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about the Ambitus project, and we've got Joe Bastian here. He is the open source software architect at IBM. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box, and we will take those at the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So hello, everyone. My name is Joe Bastian. I am an open source architect at IBM. There are many of us who focus in different areas. And I really wanted just to have a talk today about what the Ambitus project is at the Open Mainframe project, why we started it, and what we're really hoping to accomplish with it. This is an incubation project that's been going on for the last year and a half now. And the goal and the point to the Ambitus project from the beginning has always been to simply assist in helping to build out the open source community around the mainframe. And there are really two key ways in which I'm trying to do that with this project. As I was looking out at and asking myself, what does it take for the mainframe to become a vibrant part of the open source ecosystem today? What kinds of things do we have to accomplish in order to make that happen? And certainly the Open Mainframe project has just been a wonderful forward step in the right direction to establish our presence in the open source community, to advocate for the platform, and to do many of the right things that are necessary in order for us to gain acceptance with this really vitally important set of communities. The open source community now is pretty much responsible for most of the new code that gets deployed for various solutions, whether they are a corporate offering or just an open source project. If you look around today, there really aren't a whole lot of software houses that actually build their own proprietary stuff from scratch and maintain it in a conventional way. So I think we in the mainframe community have recognized this for quite a while, and certainly our presence in the Linux space has been very important, not only for the mainframe, but also to push Linux forward as well. I mean, think about where Linux would be today if the mainframe community didn't also participate and advocate for some of the things that have really made Linux an enterprise platform today. So with all of that, there are a lot of things that we do really well in the mainframe community related to open source. But the question becomes, what do we do next, right? What is the next step we can take in terms of making this accessible to someone who may know nothing about the platform whatsoever? And so I noticed from my own point of view, working on Linux and with, like everyone else, assorted open source projects over the years, if I imagined myself as not knowing anything about the mainframe and I wanted to get started with a given project, where would I begin? And certainly, if you go to the Open Mainframe project, you can find lots of good activity out there. Certainly, Zoe is very important from an interface point of view, a new interface to the mainframe, and setting up the proper infrastructure and structure with which to interact with the mainframe using modern interfaces, right? And they've really been very, very successful in this space. Certainly COBOL's gaining a lot of traction recently too. So, but if I'm a small developer or a college student and I just want to learn about what the mainframe is there anything are there any gaps that we can fill with a project like Ambitus? And so two things occurred to me as something that we could provide with the Ambitus project that weren't already covered to the extent that maybe they needed to be. The first one was to just simply provide how-to and example information on common practices, common best practices, everyday things that you need to know about the platform if you're thinking about using it. I'll give a couple of examples. Everybody knows that the mainframe is a big endian platform. How does that affect what I need to do as a developer or even just a software user on the platform? what issues do I have to be aware of? How might they affect me as I try to bring open source software to the platform or develop my own application? And so we try to provide a home at Ambitus for how-to information, things to be aware of, defining what a big Indian platform is in case you may not know, and providing pointers to additional explanations if people need them. Another one is the fact that if you're running on the ZOS side anyhow, on the ZOS platform, that's an EBCDIC platform. If you're over on Linux, it's typical ASCII the way it is on x86, and so you don't have to worry about that issue. But if you're bringing your open source over to the ZOS side, it's another thing you have to think about. Those kinds of things, that information scattered all around the internet today. You can find fragments of information about it in IBM books. You can find them in, there's an active Google community that's centered on the mainframe, and you can find bits and pieces if you know where to look, and you happen to find the right point in time where people are discussing that topic. So what I'm hoping to do with the Ambitus project is, when we establish enough of a following that folks begin to recognize that, hey, I can go here and just find out those kinds of things, those characteristics of the mainframe that I may need to know at a high level, and what things are the same for that matter. So I'm hoping by establishing this footprint here, we can say, look, check here if there's something that you don't see that you would like to know more about. You could either ask one of the experts from the Ambitus project to fill in that hole, or participate yourself. Ideally, we would like people to become part of the community themselves, and we're very open to anyone who wants to contribute anything. The second thing that I wanted to do with this project was provide a home for projects that are being ported to the mainframe, whether that's on Linux or ZOS. What we found over the years as we worked with software within IBM, open source software within IBM, for instance, is that we would go through a porting process or a particular change to open source that's required to get things to run well on the platform. And for various reasons, one or another, we're not successful at upstreaming the changes to the original community. When anyone who's tried to upstream before knows that sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you're working on a large project that has lots of contributors and lots of changes. Sometimes it can be hard to gain acceptance of that community, especially if they don't know who you are. And so what happens oftentimes then is that people start to accumulate porting changes and essentially a separate fork of a particular open source repository. Those things tend to be isolated pockets of useful code that exist within various entities, usually within a private corporation like an IBM or one of our business partners. And I know that anybody who works with as one of our business partners and has an extensive open source catalog, I'm sure that all of them have open source changes that are stuck away in a corner in somebody's source repository somewhere. And the idea is that with Ambitus, for those things that we can't get upstreamed, you could publish them here. And the idea is that rather than keep all of that as more or less a secret from the outside world, demonstrate to the open source community that, hey, there is a lot of work going on in this space. And no, we haven't been able to upstream these changes yet, but you can find them here. You don't have to go hunting for them, or you may discover that, in fact, yes, we are working with a particular project, and we have made some progress with it. We just have not simply been able to become a fully supported platform with the rest of the community yet. Now, some of the barriers that become involved there are, a lot of times you'll hear from the open source community, we're very busy right now, we don't have time to support another platform, or sure, we'd welcome your changes, but we have no way to test this and integrate it with our CI/CD pipeline. And until you can solve that problem, you know, there's nothing we can do. Or, you know, sometimes people just say, don't bother me, right? And so what we really want to do is provide a home for those kinds of things. And we are trying to solve the kinds of problems like, you know, where do people go when they want to test something out on a mainframe? This is a discussion that's not centered in Ambitus, but it's a general open mainframe project discussion that we have on a regular basis. And there are lots of solutions out there that are sort of in the works to try to open the platform up so that if you are a developer and you need a test resource, you can find a place where you can go off and acquire the resources necessary to do whatever verification it is you want to do. So we want to make that easier. But again, that's a general open mainframe project direction. And we want Ambitus to fit into that very well. So if you look out at our GitHub repository in our org, there are several repositories out there. Some of them are brand new open source projects that people have created from scratch and want to publish. And others are existing open source projects with changes that have not yet upstreamed. So sort of a side facet or feature that goes along with the idea of hosting source repositories for people who have new code. People who write new code from scratch can go ahead and put their things out here rather than put it under their own organization and have it be lost in the sea of GitHub repos that everybody, you know, well, nobody knows about because there are so many out there. There's no time to, or there's no place to begin to even search for that kind of function. So what we're really hoping is that as this project continues to gain traction and we grow the eminence of the project over time, people become more familiar with it. We're hoping that people circle around to this and start using it as a regular resource and engage with us, you know, in an active manner. We've had some very good involvement, and we are gaining momentum, you know, over time here. So strongly encourage anyone who's got a question, a suggestion, or an idea for a new project, and they want to put it somewhere, where it has the potential to be seen and integrated with the rest of the open source community and discovered, right? Like most things these days, the hardest part, you know, of everyone having a voice is that it's hard to make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd. And so if you are a software developer, if you are working in the mainframe space or you want to know more about the mainframe space, our doors are open. Get in touch with us and just let us know what's going on. We have a mailing list and a Slack channel, as all the projects at the Open Mainframe Project do. And certainly you can contact me, but I don't think that my email is available out there. If anybody wants, though, I can put my email in the chat, and you're welcome to get in touch with me to learn more about how to move ahead. So that's kind of my introductory pitch. I had really hoped that today we could have a discussion about about what the project is and what it could be. And so if anybody has a question, I'd certainly be glad to entertain a discussion.
Yeah, feel free to enter your questions in the chat. I'm gonna give everybody a second to type in any questions they may have. Mm-hmm.
Chris, if you wouldn't mind, could you scroll down to the bottom of this page and click on our GitHub repo? We could just give people an idea right there where it says explore the code on GitHub. People could start to get an idea of the kinds of things that we've made available there. So yeah, perfect. So We've been spending a lot of time working with containerized workloads lately. My team focuses a lot on that. There's a lot of work going on at IBM in the containerized workload space. And so we have a repo out there called Linux containers that has a lot of information on how to use them. As an alternative, we also have the ZOS native repo, which contains all sorts of tools, a lot of hints and tips on how to do native porting to ZOS, as opposed to simply running a container image on Linux or ZOS these days. So, you know, if you want to find a technique or a suggestion or even a tool that you're welcome to download, all of our code is, you know, under the Apache 2 license. You can go ahead and make use of it under the terms of that license agreement, and use for whatever you want. And certainly we would love it if you could, if you wanted to extend a tool or provide something new. ZML is actually a new sub-project that we're hosting. Someone at IBM has created a tool that allows you to specify in YAML code and generate YAML code to map out control blocks in ZOS. And this can technically work on any platform, but the goal and the reason for doing this on ZOS is that we have lots and lots of assembler-based interfaces that are part of the platform that have no high-level language analog. And so if people need to access one of our published external control blocks, they have to drop into assembler to figure it out. We are making the ZML tool available so that people can create their own control block specifications and generate Python code directly to access those kinds of things. So that's another way that we're trying to open up the platform. Now, originally when the team behind this wanted to come to the Open Mainframe project, there was a question, should it be its own separate project? And we eventually settled on the idea that it would be a repository that we would host under Ambitus, because you know, quite honestly, to run your own fully blown project at the Open Mainframe project, you know, takes effort. You have to set up governance, and there's a structure that you have to follow. If you just have some code that you want to publish, you can bring it into the Ambitus project, and our team here will go ahead and handle, you know, the regular technical steering committee meetings, all of the regular governance that it takes to be a member in good standing at the Open Mainframe project and the Linux Foundation. So, you know, if you have a smaller effort that you want people to get together and use, you're certainly welcome to come and host it at the Ambitus project, and we would be glad to, you know, shepherd that on forward on your behalf. If in fact, though, over time, the community really grows for ZML, we always have the option of breaking this out into its own separate project, right? So we look at Ambitus as a way to incubate newer, smaller efforts, and then potentially let them grow into their own fully blown project. So before I go on it and we review any of the other things, any questions yet?
I don't have any questions yet.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we can go down the list. There's some very interesting things here that we're trying to do. So some may recognize binutils and GCC as you know, Linux facilities. These are examples of ports that are in progress now by a member of our team who is actively gone off and ported both GCC and binutils to ZOS, and is making them run. So the code changes that are necessary here are available through these particular repos, and you can go and see what kind of work's being done there. These are examples of where we have not upstreamed changes yet. At some point in time, you can think of this as a staging area where you want to reach a critical mass of updates before going with an upstream request. And so that's the state that these two particular projects are in right now. The latest of our repositories that we've created now is the PyZ Kiln repository. We just started that this past week, and although the description for it is a little bit humorous, the goal here is to provide a place to use to create more modern automation and workloads for DevOps purposes that perhaps are not part of some of the solutions that we have available today. So for instance, Zoe provides a lot of structure and automation. And so, you know, you can go there, you can get a lot of that infrastructure and make use of it right away. These are for smaller efforts that perhaps one day might wind up as a Zoe feature, or may wind up perhaps as you know, an Ansible recipe of some kind, right? A playbook, but yet we haven't graduated, you know, sort of to that level yet. So you think of the Kiln as a way to do open source kinds of things to control and administer the ZOS platform. And the idea here is that you would create, metaphorically speaking, bricks of functionality that you can assemble or stack together to create something, you know, that is useful. And so there are a lot of creative thoughts and ideas that are going into this space. A lot of them are Python based, although they don't have to be. And the idea is that we have lots of utilities out there on the ZOS platform, things like ZOAU, ZDTT, WASI, and those kinds of solutions. And so think of PyZ Kiln as a place to write applications that may make use of those particular pieces of infrastructure today, open source infrastructure, and provide them out here to do something useful. There's a great place to document use cases for these particular open source capabilities. Right? And again, these are the structure of the functionality put out here is very fluid, and we may find that it's better to refactor things or move things to other projects as they make sense. But what do you do with the things, you know, in the meantime, when perhaps you're just beginning, you're just getting started, and you're not quite sure how they may fit in with one of the larger frameworks, right? So a lot of possibility here. There's a lot of creativity that I'm hearing from that team in terms of what it is they want to accomplish and how they want to go about it. The Ambitus repo, of course, is where we keep all of our governance information. We have our list of maintainers there, etc. If you want to know more about how the project actually operates, that's the repository you'll want to go to, and you should be able to find meeting minutes, members who participate, and all of that. We meet twice a month, or every 2 weeks, I should say, and you know, we just talk about potential new content. We talk about what's working well, and you know, how do we need to manage the project. Linux containers, I already spoke to a bit. We have some Docker files in here. We have, again, tools and use cases that explain how people can come in and make use of containers, whether they're running on Linux or they're running on ZOS and a ZCX appliance. I do tend to see that probably the advice in here is used more heavily by the ZOS community, given that container capability, Linux container capability, is relatively new. Certainly on the Linux side, everybody, many people there are familiar with the Docker environment and are at ease with, you know, working with those kinds of workloads. So, but in either case, this is a great place to discover what's available on the system and look for some useful advice on how to make best use of containers on the platform. glibc is another example of a ported Linux environment, a large one. GCC and glibc are very large you know, compiler and runtime projects. So there's a lot of work that's gone on in here. You can see there's been quite a bit of activity in this space in the past, but yes, these projects continue to be hosted here. And at any point in time, if someone wants to discover, you know, what kinds of porting changes are necessary to make this work, they can find them here. The last one is actually a little project that I put together myself. This is a little project of mine called Xetron. The point to this is to enable essentially the Jupyter UI to run on ZOS to accomplish DevOps kinds of tasks. Now, Jupyter's not new to ZOS, but it generally falls within the data science domain. So people doing data science understand what Jupyter is and how to make it run on ZOS. I thought that perhaps we could extend the use case for Jupyter to do, you know, more mundane DevOps kinds of things, you know, for various purposes, system administration of various kinds, and that there was a lot of opportunity to use Jupyter notebooks as a means to not only allow program execution, but assist with the education of new users to the platform, so that eventually we could get to the point where if someone has a use case or a task necessary to go off and administer a ZOS system, or for that matter, a Linux system, and they want to explain it, all the steps in detail, that can be captured in a Jupyter notebook rather than written down on a piece of paper or a red book or any other manual that's out there. From my experience with ZOS system administrators in particular, they really tend to like you know, an ordered cookbook of steps that it takes to accomplish things, and that's a great way to do things. It's a great way to make sure that you you know, you do everything you're required to do. You don't miss a step along the way, and those kinds of things. And you'll find a lot of system administrators actually have, you know, check boxes that they make for themselves. All of that can be captured very easily in a Jupyter notebook and done in a, you know, a way that's shareable with others, more readily shared anyhow. Right? And so that's the hope we have for this this particular project. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done on the platform to truly sort of unleash the capabilities we have planned here, but we think we're getting close to, you know, to that happen. So I do see that there is one question. Yes, Javier. Hey, Javier. Can you comment on the prerequisites to accept an open source project hosted in Ambitus? Can anyone apply? So the answer is yes, anyone can apply. We don't have a rigid set of rules to conform to or anything like that. We've taken code fragments as small as, you know, one shell script of 25 lines. That's fine. If somebody wants to provide that, we'll find a home for it in one of our existing repos. So ZOS native, for instance, or Linux containers, those often tend to be good repositories for very small fragments of code. Anyone can apply, and we would encourage anyone who just has you know, something you want to share to join us, get in touch with us. And what we would do is we would invite you to a technical steering committee meeting where we could just talk through what it is that you have and what it is that you might want to provide, or discuss any other way you want to collaborate. From there, we'll figure out, you know, do we need to create another repo, you know, to add to our collection, or does it fit in with one of the existing ones? Okay. And do we require a certain amount of activity in the project? No, we don't. We don't require, you know, we're not going to hold people's feet to the fire in the sense of, you know, you have to be active a certain amount. Certainly there are open source projects where that is perhaps an important thing. At this point in time, we're just trying to build a community. And the best way to do that is to simply make a place where people can come and share their ideas. Whether that's one idea and you know, and you're done, you know, maybe that happens. We don't see that as a, you know, a failing or a problem. right? If the extent of your interaction with us is short, then so be it. We'd still like to hear what you've got to say. Okay. Certainly, though, if you want to, you're certainly welcome to take a more active role and become a maintainer. You know, there are certain criteria for that to happen, but if you're simply just a contributor, then by all means, the door's open. We have something in the chat. Okay. So question in the chat. Is IBM mainframe hardware actively being sold? That is, where's the demand in the market and how many companies still purchase mainframes? So I am not a sales or marketing person. I do know that we sell quite a bit of mainframe hardware, and it's still to this day a very lucrative business for the IBM Corporation. I can't speak for IBM. I'm speaking on behalf of Ambitus and the open source open mainframe project. But you know, the things that you will hear in IBM press releases are really true. There are lots of very large corporate customers out there who are heavily invested in IBM Z and have plans to continue that well into the future or even expand on the deployments that they have. So I don't have the figures at my fingertips. I'm from a development organization, so I don't, you know, I'm not a marketing person who would know those kinds of numbers. And I would not hazard a guess as to, you know, how many clients we have out there. But, you know, you can certainly look around and look at some of the IBM marketing material and try to get a better understanding of, you know, of that environment. The only thing I will say is that IBM tends to be rather conservative in the way that we talk about our accomplishments. And so you can take what's published in the marketing material and believe what it says. If this is a very important platform around the world, and if the mainframe were to disappear tomorrow, I think people would be amazed at how many things break. So we're a very vital part of the global ecosystem. Let's see. Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions.
Okay. So we, you know, that's kind of the extent that I wanted to discuss what the purpose of the Ambitus project is. Again, I see us as a sort of a place at the Open Mainframe project to go off and provide a way for contributors to offer up their time and their talent and anything that they want to share with the broader community in a low impact way. A lot of times if you're going to get involved with an open source community, there's a commitment involved that can sometimes be a lot of work, and not everybody has the time to do that. So we're really hoping at this point in time to, you know, to provide a place for people to easily collaborate. Let's just put it that way. Perhaps think of it as a public square where you can come in and talk with other people in the mainframe space. I see we do have another question. To what extent can you run containers on ZOS apart from the Z container extension? Okay, so the short answer is that you can't. Z container extension appliances are required as the runtime environment for Linux containers on ZOS. So I always think of it as a type of a hypervisor. What you do is go in and create, we refer to it as an appliance for lack of a better term. I know the term appliance has been applied to mean many different things on various platforms, but here what it means is you go off, you run through an automated workflow that will define a whole set of resources required to bring up a container extensions environment. That involves ZOS data sets for persistent storage. It involves, the system image. The kernel gets loaded into these data sets. There are network definitions involved. There are all sorts of resources that all have to be configured to run together to provide the ZCX functionality. And then once you have that done, you can start it up as an address space, just like you would any other task on the platform. And then you can SSH into it, and you have a full live Linux environment. From there, that's where you deploy your containers, your containerized workloads. You pull things using the Docker command line, and you do all of that. This is the only place where that functionality exists on the platform. So you can't take a container image and say, telnet into the TSO environment and in any way make use of that. For those who may not, be familiar with ZOS, TSO is one of the runtime environments that you can get into. Think of container extensions as providing another interface that is a fully capable Linux environment that's tailored to supporting the Docker command line interface. So now, that said, what you get out of that environment is a full running Linux environment that then can communicate through TCP/IP to the ZOS, the outside ZOS platform. And right now, that TCP/IP is the only interface where that that occurs. So if you go in and, for instance, set up an Nginx server to serve web pages, and you want to talk to the outside world, you can do that through any server that happens to be running, on ZOS. So if there's a published IP address and you can reach that, and you have a port number that your application is listening to, or a REST interface, you can interact that way between container extensions and ZOS. So I hope that answers the question. This is a big topic, so we could go in many different directions on this particular.
Any last questions out there? Now's your chance to get them answered.
Personally, I've been a big fan of ZCX. I've worked as an extended part of that development team for the past 1.5 years now. It's a really nice environment. Think of it as, well, Unix System Services exists on ZOS today. You can SSH into Unix System Services and interact directly with ZOS through Unix interfaces. What's nice about container extensions is it's a fully blown Linux environment, and therefore you have a lot more capability to run Linux workloads. As anybody knows who's ever tried to port code from the Linux community over to ZOS, there are a lot of dependencies that are not satisfied in the ZOS environment. And while it's worthwhile to port code to ZOS, it's also not a lightweight process. And so if you really want your open source Linux-based code to run on ZOS, you always have the option of porting it over to ZOS itself. Just be forewarned, though, that is a pretty heavyweight process. If you want it to run quickly, or perhaps you even want to just prototype an environment or show a proof of concept, ZCX can be a very, very, Z container extensions can be a very, very useful tool to demonstrate code rapidly without spending 6 or 9 months, trying to get it to run. If it runs in a Linux environment and you can compile and build it on a Linux on Z platform or a Linux One platform and generate a container image for it, you just deploy it into your container extensions environment and you're up and running. So we've been really, really pleased with the capabilities of that particular new feature of ZOS. Okay. But again, Ambitus is here to help people, who may want to go through the full porting effort, because again, we could go down a rabbit hole of discussion about, when do you make the decision to containerize and maybe deploying ZCX versus porting to ZOS. But in both cases, Ambitus is meant to be here, to find out, what you need to go forward in either one of these two environments. Okay.
Thanks so much, Joe. I think I don't have any other questions coming in. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's it. I want to thank everybody for your time, and certainly if you have more curiosity about, the platform in general, I see, Jeff, if you want to know more about mainframes in general in terms of, how popular and pervasive they are today, please you can get in touch with me. Let me, let me put my name. I'll put this in the chat. This is my email address. If anybody wants to get in touch with me directly, please feel free to do so, or reach out to us through, the Ambitus Slack channel or the mailing list. Those are published at the Open Mainframe project. If you drill down into any one of the projects, or ask anybody else at the Open Mainframe project how to get in touch with us, we're out there. And like I say, please feel free to drop me a message if you want as well. That also works. Okay.
Thank you so much, Joe. This is super interesting. If anybody missed any part of this, it will be recorded and posted onto YouTube by the end of day today on the OMP YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. And thank you, everyone else. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next month. We'll be covering our ZOE quarterly update.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.